FSM Sports Game Changing Podcast. We're here today with Oscar Moreno, speed coach extraordinaire from here in the Bay Area, Central Valley. Oscar, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I want to just talk a little bit about all things to do with speed and movement and kids and injury prevention and all the little bits and pieces in between. So tell me a little bit about yourself, how you got into what you're doing, how long have you been doing it? Go.
Yeah. So Oscar Moreno, originally from the Bay Area, moved out to the Central Valley when I was fairly young. Grew up in sports, every single sport, baseball, soccer. Only one I didn't do was football because my mom was a little bit scared about all the contact. But grew very diverse. I mean, I'm sure you knew how it was 20 years ago. Everybody's outside, everybody's moving, everybody's riding bikes, not too much technology. So I think just even that played such a big, role into the type of athlete that I developed and grew into. Played a couple years in college at Crown College University. Then after that, shortly took a small break away from sports. Caught myself back into coaching baseball roughly around, I believe it was like 2018, around that time, 2017. Actually coaching with one of my old coaches, which was just really kind of funny to be back there, not right next to his side, no longer as a player, but as a coach. He definitely played, this is Coach Junior. He was an ex-professional baseball player. And he played such a big role into this development of a coach, and something that I honestly personally never thought I would see myself being in. So shout out to Coach Junior. Thank you for everything. And then after doing about a year of just baseball coaching, I started to find myself more interested in movement, in speed and strength, in the developmental process of the athlete. Not that the skill stuff wasn't amusing to me or enticing, but I felt like I could make more of a change or more of a difference in the area that I was in, focusing on how I can keep the athletes healthy, how I can help keep developing them in season, off season. And that's just kind of where I found myself. I guess you surround yourself by wherever it is that your mind is at, and went in, worked with a couple of different gyms here in the Tracy area. But as of 2.5 years ago, came into Tab Athletics, Tracy, with Tyler Palacios. And that's when really things started to take a big turn for me. We brought on GPS. We went out and did some interning with a guy named Lester Spellman in San Diego. He is one of the top speed movement coaches in the whole world. I would even say now. He works with a lot of the I think for the past 3 years he's trained. He does more. He does everything, but he works with the football players going into the draft. So he gets them ready, prepped for the 40 and all that stuff. So he's had like the top 3 draft picks within the past few years. He was a really big game changer for us. He introduced us to Laurent, who was one of the main guys with McLeod, the GPS system that I'm currently actually working with now. And so we brought on GPS 2.5 years ago. We started doing some more virtual internship stuff with Jonas Dodu, Speedworks training. Kind of starting to see and notice how, I wouldn't say most training is very generalized, but when it comes to an athlete and working with athletes, most programs are generalized, and we wanted to take a little bit more thought and dive deeper into, like I said, the developmental process of an athlete, how we can change certain things within their body to get them to adapt and to be better athletes at the end of the day, right? So recently now, I work with Delta College, doing some stuff now with St. Mary's, San Juan Soccer Club, and then of course still, helping out over at the gym, have some of my personal clients over there, and then now kind of doing a full-time position with McLeod, bring a little bit more awareness to GPS, to the Central Valley, to the Bay Area, to coaches, to help them better understand their athletes, who they're working with, and to talk a little bit. I mean, I guess we'll probably dive into GPS a little bit later on, but just a long introduction about who I am and I guess how I've got to where I am now.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen you in action. I've seen the way you are inspiring the kids to actually buy into the warm up. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I do want to just kind of go back to your website, which is tap-athletics.com. And we'll post all of this in the show notes, how people can find you. But part of your mission statement, our goal is to educate athletes through proper running and exercise mechanics. I think that should be in bold. And to unlock each individual's full athletic potential physically and mentally. Many people do speed training, very few make athletes faster. You hit so many key words there that I think is so important. You know, with kids, I have 3 girl teenagers living at home. And one of the most important pivotal things of me being a mom is to raise strong girls. And that's easier said than done. I think, you know, a lot of times we can just unleash them on the world. With girls, you know, and they're all athletes. Part of, you know, developing strong girls is the buy-in that their bodies and their brains both have to be strong, and they have to be strong together throughout this whole journey. Definitely. So, you know, and we'll talk about injury prevention too, as a major part of what I wanted to talk to you today about. But let's just go back to the warm up. Getting kids to buy into a proper dynamic warm up. I hate even using the word warm up. It seems so antiquated, you know, so we'll say dynamic movement session or something to try to spark them. Because the minute you say to kids, you have to warm up, like, oh, do I have to? They just want to go play. So how do we get athletes, not even just teenagers, to buy into a proper dynamic movement or dynamic warm up?
Definitely. I think the biggest thing is just getting an athlete out of their comfort zone. So I would say, you know, 9 out of 10 clubs or teams or coaches or athletes that I may go work with, for the most part, it's kind of just you jump straight into some dynamic warm up, right? You got your knee pulls, your quad stretch, your lunges, which is good, but at least they're moving. But it's something that just becomes so, I would even say robotic and,
Totally.
and just, you know, without thought, that they're just doing it because they have to. And because probably every sport that they go to, it's the same warm up and the same type of prep. So right out the gate, the athlete they're talking, they're not actually engaged. They're not thinking about where I should be feeling this or what muscle am I activating, you know, or so I think the first thing starts with engagement from the athlete, making sure that they understand, you know, what we're getting into today. You know, today's going to be an acceleration day. We're going to be doing a lot of pushes. So we need to make sure that we're doing this and doing that and doing that. Right. And then I said, getting athletes out of their comfort zone. So meaning, sorry, I'm outside. There's a big old truck coming by. So if,
we can
might be
probably
a little loud here. Yeah. Okay. We can kind of cut that out however we need to. But, yeah. So then, getting kids out of their comfort zone. Biggest thing I learned from Jonas Dodu. He's a huge mentor. To me, he's played such a huge role in my development as a coach and you know what I was able to intern with him for virtually still currently interning, doing some, you know, we hop on calls from time to time just because I always have questions and I'll let the truck pass. He's actually, you know, I'm a big person on following, not necessarily following, but being around people that are essentially where I want to be at, or people that I look up to, right? I learn a lot from everybody. I'm that type of coach that from you, I'm going to learn something from everybody who I have an interaction with. And that's how I think that, I mean, all athletes as well should have that type of, you know, outlook on life. But going back to the warm up, Jonas Soda, he was the first person that kind of, you know, first thing we do is we get on the ground, right? We could tell a lot about how an athlete moves. Do they have weak hips? Do they have weak feet? Is there stability? You know, we can start to tell a lot about who we're working with and the athlete just by simply doing some stuff on the ground. So just I think off the bat, getting them out of their comfort zone, doing some stuff they maybe haven't done before, is going to already start to get them engaged. And then when they start to, their body starts to crack, because I mean, so we go on the stuff, we do some iron crosses. We lay on our back, we swing the leg across one side, swing the leg across the other side. Athletes love that because they're sitting down all day. So now they're getting their body to move in different planes of motion. So I think it's first off, engagement, getting out of your comfort zone, and then thirdly, actually just doing something, like I said, that the athletes aren't necessarily used to doing, that are going to get them to actually think and focus on what's actually going on. Okay, oh wow, I'm cramping up during the warm up. What does that tell me, right? Or so there's different ways of diving into a proper warm up, but I think it from the coaching perspective is it takes time to actually set up a good warm up. We shouldn't keep it the same for months at a time. We should try to switch it up with our athletes. We should try to I always ask, hey, where do you feel this, right? Or what muscle do we think we're working now, or why do you think we're doing this exercise, right? So I'm always wanting to get consistent feedback from my athletes, just to make sure that they know why we're doing it, not just doing it because I'm telling them to do it, right? And then the goal is also to just our warm up may take 30 minutes, and that's just part of the thing, that at the end of the day, I'd rather take 30 minutes on a warm up and spend less time during the session to make sure that, everyone stays healthy during our practice and throughout the year at the end of the day. Because as kids get older, they're just more prone to injury. When they're younger, they need to be doing more. I think that's just one of the big things that I kind of slightly touched up on in the beginning about, when we were growing up, it was, if we're not at baseball practice, we're at soccer practice. If we're not at baseball or soccer, we're at home riding the bike. If we're not riding the bike, we're out playing tag. We were putting ourselves through these different movements, changing direction and jumping and doing all these different things that we didn't know that subconsciously were forming, we were forming ourselves as athletes, and nowadays with, look outside. I know it's during school right now, but even during summer, right? It's you don't see too many kids that are as active as we would like them to be, which is why we're starting to see, I think, a lot more injuries happening, as kids are evolving and getting older.
Agreed. So much to unpack right there. One of the things I wrote down as a statistic I wanted to share with you, and you probably know this, but the newest research is saying that kids that do the same sport or the same activity with most of the same movement patterns for more than 8 months, if they're under the age of 18, are 81% more likely to get moderate to severe injury. So that's not so surprising for people like you and I, because we're seeing kids coming in more and more, especially in the last, 10, 20 years. I think part of it is, there was that stupid book that came out that said we needed to do, our kids needed to do like 10,000 reps in order to get a scholarship or to make the pros. And so everybody specialized their kids so young, so early. And all that we're seeing from the fallout is kids quit the sport because it wasn't fun anymore. Because like anything else in life, if you always eat oatmeal for breakfast, a time is going to come where you're like, I can't look at another bowl of oatmeal anymore. So kids are burning out from their own injury or their own activity. They say now upwards of 70% of kids stop competitive sports at the age of 13 because it's not fun. And that's heartbreaking. Like you said, there's something so organic about being a kid and just so I'm from Canada. In the wintertime, everybody, played hockey or they skated. And in the summertime, we were all outside playing soccer or baseball or something. There was multiple different activities just organically. And you didn't have the choice to play one sport all year round. And I think that's really, really sad. I mean, I get it. Clubs have to make money. So why not have a program that's 12 months as opposed to 6? But we're really doing a disservice to multi-sport athletes. We should be promoting this, not penalizing them.
Yeah, definitely. That's such a, hit the nail on the head with that one for sure, because I see it so often now with, oh, my kid's a pitcher only, and he's 12 years old, and you know, and then you wonder why his arm is going to be going through Tommy John surgery by the time he's a junior in high school, you know, because he's done this movement, this movement, this movement only, you know, and it definitely does take a toll. Maybe not so much earlier on in life, but definitely as kids get older, you know, your body only knows what it knows, right? So going back to like how you said, making it fun, you know, with our warm up, how it kind of goes is we'll go like 10 minutes on the ground, depending on what the session is. We call it our ground activation. We'll hop into a dynamic warm up where we do a lot. At this point, we're doing no shoes. So we have our kids in just, you know, socks if they want, you know, barefoot at the end of the day. Because like we said, a lot of these injuries stem from weak feet. If we have weak feet, we have weak ankles. We have weak ankles, we have weak calves, which then leads to the knees and the hips, right? So we gauge everything based off of our hips are our drivers, and our feet are what's making contact with the ground. So we need to make sure that those two things, and then of course our core, you know, and then after we kind of go ground dynamic, most of the times, depending on the group, depending on the day, I like to do just a small sided game. So whether it be like we have some, maybe it might be just like a reaction. There's a cone on the ground. We go head, shoulders, cone, and then, you know, we're competing, we're having fun. So before we get into our session, maybe we'll do something like kids are wearing the pennies out the back and they're doing kind of like a tag or, you know, like, you know, trying to grab the penny from each other so they're actually moving, and we're getting them engaged, right? At the end of the day, like you said, it is about having fun at a younger age. And that's the thing too, is I've you know, worked at the gym, we see kids as young as 4 or 5 years old. And then we have kids that are, you know, I mean, pro, college as well. So also getting, you know, falling into, at one point I was like, well, you know, I'm trying to get super detailed with this 6 and 7-year-old, and at the end of the day, they just, you know, get them to do an obstacle course, get them to jump over some stuff, you know, maybe getting them to actually get what you want from them without telling them, hey, I need you to do a hurdle hop into a lateral push step into a sprint forward, and then, you know, changing your verbiage with how you're, you know, getting athletes to, I guess, you know, I don't really like to use the word buy-in, but, you know, it is something where like the biggest thing I've learned from coaching is that if the athlete is not, you know, present and they don't want to be there, then we're not actually going to be, you know, getting what we want from that session or that time being spent with the athlete. So growing a relationship, you know, having that, you know, hey, you can ask me stuff. You know, I want the kids to always ask me stuff, and then to, you know, and when there's those kids that, hey, why are we doing this? You know, it's like I don't ever see them as like, you know, sit down or something. Those are the athletes that I want to be working with me, because I know they want to be there. You know, I know they take me serious, they take their sport serious, they take themselves serious at the end of the day. So
I wish more people were like that though. I'm going to talk about my own child. I'm going to talk about both of my kids for a second, but my middle daughter had a sore ankle for, I don't know, a few months. This was probably 3 years ago. And 11-year-old shouldn't have one sore ankle. Something's wrong with that. So her pediatrician's like, oh, it's probably just growing pains. No, growing pains don't happen across the top of an ankle on one ankle for a long period of time, especially when you have an athlete that wants to participate. I get if a kid's that's trying to pull the chute and wants to quit something, and it's that, you know, it's the same thing as, oh, I have a stomach ache, I can't go to school. Yeah. Fast forward, send her to a podiatrist who doesn't even do a functional exam, just looks at her ankle with his eyes after she points to where it's sore, and wants to remove her from all the sport and put her in a walking boot. To try to get the joint to calm down, the joint that he didn't even examine.
Yeah.
Fast forward, because I'm her mom, and I'm like, no, you're fired. Now you're fired. I'll find somebody that can figure out why this ankle is sore. Orthopedic doctor takes an x-ray, says it's normal, says to take time off, rest, immobilize, blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to another, our third orthopedic doctor, who says, I think something is wrong with this ankle. Let's take a different x-ray, and finds that she was actually born with 2 bones fused in her ankle. So that's
Wow.
why her ankle wasn't moving. And that's why it was sore, because she was trying so hard to get dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. And if you've got 2 bones that are fused that are preventing that movement to happen,
Yeah.
obviously the kid's going to have pain. So we
Yeah.
elected to have the bones sawed apart. She's got wax in between the joint now, and now she's starting to she has to learn how to run all over again, and to convince her brain that there is a joint there that she can actually power up from. So
Yeah.
part of my point in telling this story is, as parents, I think we really have to listen to our kids. And you kind of hit the nail on the head there. When you've got an athlete that's really dialed in to get better, and they're complaining about part of the mechanical chain that's causing them discomfort, we have to listen to our kids. And as coaches, you're evaluating movement probably better than anybody else that I've talked to. You can see things, and you're looking at the chain, from the hips down, from the feet up, and everything in between that. So when you've got somebody that's rehabbing from injury, let's just talk about an ankle for a second, because I had talked about this. One of the things that you are doing that I think is, I'm hearing more and more of the really good coaches talking about it, is barefoot training. Shoes are not all created equally. When we're talking about hockey, those kids are locked into a very rigid skate with very little need for ankle stability or ankle movement, because it's really immobilized in there. Soccer cleats, those are terrible. Like, who designed those? Some of the I mean, I get it, we have to protect their feet, and it has to be hard to kick a ball, but what do you think some of these athletes, I mean, kids obviously can't just go running barefoot down the street, but what are some of your favorite barefoot or things that kids can start working with at home or at the park or somewhere?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even just by starting to move your toes, so like, sometimes with the athletes we'll get as it's boring, no athlete wants to sit there and just drive their big toe through the ground while they lift their other 4 toes up in the air, but we're, working that foot there, doing the opposite. So just starting to get more control of your feet. Um, I mean, calf raises are going to be your best friend, tib raises. If you could bang those out every day, I would suggest every athlete to. Any sort of strength. I know sometimes it can be a little bit sketchy if you're working with some heavy weights and you have no shoes on. But anytime we're in the gym on our strength days, we're making sure that our athletes are with no shoes. Just because, like you're saying, a kid, or in general, I mean, a person will spend 95% of their day in a shoe. Maybe that's on the higher end of things, but somewhere on the, anywhere from 70 to 90% of their day in some sort of shoe. So the more we can get them out of that shoe, the better. We do a lot of like stability, like isometrics, so where we're just like on a knee, we're driving, we're slightly elevating the heel, we're driving the ball, the foot through the floor. We're creating tension within our own ankle, foot, calf, shin complex. And then we do, a lot of isometrics, targeting and just focusing on that foot ankle complex. Running on grass barefoot, is good. When we start getting into the more intense, like jumping, cutting, we throw some support on because our feet need it, especially if the kids, don't have that support yet. Then they'll start to, we run into, kids start getting shin splints. Like, it just depends, on the athlete, right? Because if we like to train on different surfaces as well. So it's like during the early periods of our training or working with an athlete, we'll get on grass, we'll get on turf, we'll get on cement. I'm not really a fan of sand training, but we'll get on the sand. We want to make sure that we're on different surfaces as well. Getting our bodies to adapt and feel these, without knowing but your body knows, right? So I would say a lot of isometrics, a lot of calf raises, tib raises. There's various amounts of drills that you can do. But I think just by simply, if for anybody who's, just wanting to get to, maybe they feel that they have weak feet, I would just say start by, your prepping and a lot of your warm up stuff. Just take the shoes off and start to they have these toe spreaders too that you can start to use. And I think those are very cool. And then they actually have, I forgot what exactly the brand of but they have these. I have a couple pairs of some shoes that I can wear, and I wear them outdoors and stuff whenever I can.
Yeah.
You may look a little bit funny, but but at the end of the day, it's something that, I mean, over time, you start to see your toes start to get jammed up. This big toe will start to turn inward, and then when it comes to an athlete too, it's like, it does take a big play in our movement.
It's so funny that you say that. A couple weeks ago, I interviewed Mark Fitzgerald, who's a strength coach up in Canada, working with a bunch of hockey players. And in the summertime, a lot of these higher profile coaches do these smaller camps. And we were talking about a little bit more hockey specific stuff. And he said one of the things that he's been seeing is a lot of like foot and ankle instability in hockey players. So he's getting them to go barefoot, to use toe spreaders. And it's really interesting. I find this happens sometimes. There's something, I don't want to say trending, but something that, research is showing, and a lot of, like I said, these bright coaches are seeing something. What are we losing? Why are these hockey players getting groin pulls? Why are they like, injuries happen for a reason? And
Definitely.
I think, the best coaches and therapists and people that are working with athletes, the difference between them and the ones that are just kind of like checking boxes at these gyms, putting people through these templated movements, we're asking why. Instead of, hockey players get groin pulls. Yes, soccer players snap their ACLs. Why is that happening? Like, it's happening for a reason. I want to talk about ACLs for a second. So, ACL tears and reconstruction surgeries are the number one injury that we're seeing, especially in teenage girls between the ages of 12 and 18. I have a lot of ideas why that's happening, just based on a biomechanical and an anatomy sort of developmental standpoint. But let's talk about what your thoughts are. Why are these ACL snapping in these girls especially?
Yeah. Well, I think I think girls, right, they're already, in the way that they're developed, they're already more prone just based off of the way that their hips are.
Yeah.
But also I think it just goes back to the undertraining, overtraining side of things. I know the turf has been like a big, it's came into, I think, as of like turf is everywhere now. So we're starting to see, your cleats will get stuck in the ground, you'll make a turn, you go that way. But I did like a survey with San Juan, one of the soccer clubs I work with. The majority of their clubs are, I think they have like 2 boy clubs, but the rest of them are girls. But I did like just a hand, I wanted to raise a hands, like how many girls are in the gym, whether it's with their parents or with themselves, how many girls actually spend some time doing some strength training. And I would literally say it was probably like 1 out of every 50 girls, that actually raised their hand and said that they do partake in some sort of strength exercises. So we have girls that are doing a lot of running, a lot of jumping, but have, don't work that other side of the spectrum, which is the strength training that does play such a big part in everything. At the end of the day, you can't get faster if you don't get stronger. You're not going to get stronger. That's just how it works. And then I think also just that does play a big role, is just that girls are simply, not strong enough to take, this amount of workload that eventually your body just, that's just what happens. And to kind of build off of that into getting into GPS and why I found it so amusing and helpful and insightful. Just to kind of give an example for soccer, since we're talking about soccer, you got 10 players on the field. You got your forwards, your midfielders, your defenders, right? It could be a very defensive game. So now your defensive mids and your defense are taking a majority of the workload during that game, and maybe your forwards and your attacking mids, their workload wasn't so high, right? Say this was a game in college, they play on a Tuesday, so they still train throughout the week, right? So like I said, it was a very defensive game. On GPS, we're actually able to see how many sprints did an athlete do, how many accelerations, how many changes of direction, how much distance was covered, how much distance was covered under a certain amount of intensity. An athlete may cover 10,000 meters in a game, but only 2,000 of those meters is going to be at a higher intensity. The rest, they might be jogging, they might be walking, they might be short sprints. So GPS will just bring you more clarity on what is actually happening during that event, whether it be a sport or practice, right? So going back to the game, it was a very defensive game on a Tuesday. Our defense took a lot of the workload. We look at GPS. Say we don't look at GPS, right? And now we're seeing that our defense took a big toll. Our offense didn't work as much. But now come Wednesday, we still have a training session. Why is it that our offensive players and our bench reserves are doing the same amount of work that our defensive players and our mids that took such a big, their workload was super high on the day before, right? So now come Tuesday, at the end of the game, they're tired. Wednesday, they still train to do the same as everybody else. They're still tired. Now they go into a game on Friday or maybe Thursday. And these athletes over here are just, as far as workload wise, super, a lot more or tired and drained than these athletes here, right? So now they go into a game on Thursday. Maybe it goes back to be another very defensive game, right? So their workload is just being surpassed past the limit that they can handle, right? Which could potentially lead to injury. Hamstring injuries, are happening like, so say, for example, your daughter, she may run 18 miles an hour, but during the course of 2 weeks, she never hits that max velocity. So now we're more prone to injuring that hamstring just because we haven't hit those demands throughout the week leading up into that game. So same goes with changes of direction and ACLs. A lot of ACLs, unless it's like a freak accident where someone may run into you or something like that, these athletes are planting and they're turning, right? So they may not be understanding how to decel. They may not be understanding how to place their bodies in the right angles to be able to change direction efficiently, which in turn, will lead to injury. Or it'll just be, like I said, going back to the GPS side of things, is maybe during the course of 2 games throughout the week, an athlete may hit 300 changes of direction. But then now you add your practice days, right? And maybe they're getting overworked now, right? So guarantee you, like, this is just how it is, because not most programs are working with GPS, but most athletes, your starters, are getting either overtrained, and your non-starters are getting undertrained just simply because of workload and what's actually having to happen, during the course of a week or a month, right? So GPS will bring more clarity to where athletes are at during certain points of the year, and gives us as coaches just a better understanding on how we can approach our practice sessions, or how we can make sure that our athletes are staying healthy, because now I actually know how Ashley or Katie feels, not just based off of data, not just, oh, well, I know she looks tired today at practice, and I know she, maybe did a lot of sprints yesterday, and so now we can see it, right? And it'll be like on all ends of the spectrum, where it'll be like one girl may have ran like 150 sprints, and another girl maybe ran 45, right? So it is just such a big difference in workload. So going back to your question, I think the biggest reason is that because athletes aren't being trained correctly to be able to understand how to do these certain movements in the right way, right? And then also just because they're either being overtrained and their bodies are just, not being able to withstand that workload, or undertrain, and then all of a sudden they have to fill in a spot for an injured player on Thursday, and now they have to do triple the amount of sprints that their body's used to doing, or triple the amount of change of direction that they're used to having to do, right? So all of us then, so then that's when they're more injury prone.
One of the words that I want to circle back to, I mean, you always give me so much to unpack with an answer. So I'm like trying to scribble notes down as fast as
No,
you're
yeah,
talking.
sorry.
No, this is great. One of the things I had talked to Peter Twist a little while ago, and he's one of my mentors back in the late 90s. Peter Twist is up in Canada. He initially did a lot of work with hockey, but since then he's doing movement coaching for all different types of sports. And one of the things he taught us way back when was we must teach our athletes to stop before we can teach them how to go. And that is not something that is very well practiced. And from a biomechanical standpoint, it makes a whole lot of sense that you need to teach them how to stop, how to pivot, before we even talk about teaching them how to move forward in a straight line.
Exactly. Yeah.
Part of what you were talking about, with girls, I'm going to kind of circle back to that. We've got these girls whose hips are getting wider, and then biomechanically, those of you listening to the podcast, you don't get my great visual of my elbows going in as someone's hips are going out, but you can imagine as a girl's hips widen, their hips go in one direction, their knees have no choice but to buckle inwards. So biomechanically, they're at a deficit. And then mentally, they're also at a deficit because, like you said, when you were doing the survey, who's in the gym training, girls just don't think about that. And, also to their defense, are we giving these teenagers time to train? That's the other thing. So
exactly. That's
one, we have to make that a priority with their time. We have to make that a priority mentally. And, I think athletes need to see that going to practice and playing games is not going to make you a better athlete. It's a small part of their day. And I talked about one daughter that had her ankle fused. My other daughter tore her ACL. We're about halfway through her rehab right now. And as soon as it happened, I reached out to so many of, my contacts, and I had one strength coach, Charlie Weingroff, who I also interviewed last week. He'll be up soon on the podcast. When he was FaceTiming my daughter, he's like, "This is great." And her eyes are swollen from crying, and her life is over because, she's going to be out for so long. And he's like, "You've never been able to train before. And this is why this injury happened. And now you're going to have at least 9 months under your belt to really train. It's like, you're going to be in the gym, you're going to be lifting, you're going to be sprinting." And she said, "I've never done that." And he's like, "And that's why you tore your ACL. Like, you're a beast of an athlete, but she's, and she was a two-sport athlete. She played soccer and hockey, and it still wasn't enough, and and it's, to her point, she's right in that sweet spot. She's 15. She did a ton of growing. She did a ton of maturing. She's got legs that are really strong, but again, it's not enough. So her part of her rehab right now, I think she's, and I think a lot of athletes will say this, that the time that they tore their ACL was the pivotal point because they saw the value in training. So now she's doing balance and strength and sprinting and lifting and getting her upper body stronger and all the things. So
definitely.
But it's hard when you're in the weeds with it. Let's talk a little bit about this GPS device that you like, that you're using right now, because not all GPS devices are created equally. Some people just think their watch tracker is enough. So let's talk about what you're using and why you like it.
Yeah. So McLeod Sport, they are originated from France in Europe, branched out to Miami to try to take on some more just sports out here in the US. About 5 years ago, Laurent, he was in Miami, and he started to do a lot more networking, NFL teams, MLS teams, all sports really. GPS is something that can be used for every single sport. It's not just for, it could be used inside the pool for water polo. It could be used for football, for baseball, for soccer, for rugby, for lacrosse. So it's something that's universally used or can be used. Unfortunately, not every coach sees the value in it yet, but definitely within these next few years, we're going to start to see a lot more of it come about, just because it's really giving us more insight on our athletes and what's actually happening. So like I was saying, around 2.5 years ago, I brought it on with my personal athletes. Me personally never had worked with GPS ever before. You know, it was something that was foreign to me, and something that I was introduced to by Lester Spellman, because he was using it with his athletes to go deeper into like force velocity profiling, meaning like telling whether an athlete is like force dominant or velocity dominant, meaning are you a good accelerator? Are you a bad accelerator? Are you good, you know, at hot top end speeds? Are you bad at top end speeds, right? So just by simply breaking down an athlete in those 4 categories, we can start to see, you know, if I have an athlete for 2 months and he's already a good accelerator, but he can't transition or he can't maintain max velocity, right? I know which area of his athleticism I'm going to target. So he introduced us to that. Really, it was just kind of something where we were using at first as like, we didn't really know how to integrate it. We didn't know what to look at. We didn't know, you know, because you can have all the data in the world, but if you can't utilize that data to assist in your training programs, and it's almost like, why are we using it type of stuff. So 2.5 years ago, started to use it, slowly started to get a better understanding of how we could actually integrate GPS within our everything that we're doing. Started to just get outside of the gym and do a lot more just data gathering on different sports, different athletes. So right now, kind of still in the process of this project where I'm, you know, starting to understand these different demands of the game between different sports and different positions and different ages, to eventually, right, like 4 or 5 years from now, I'll be able to be like, hey, a shortstop at 14-year-old is going to be on average doing this during a game. You know, a soccer player, midfielder at this age will be doing precisely this amount of workload during the game. So it's something that over time it's going to be a process, but it's something that I see is just super valuable for all coaches and all athletes and all parents that take interest in seeing what their athlete is doing. Because now it's like, on top of being able to take a look at workload and you know, sprint, accelerations, change of direction, all these different metrics, we can also see imbalance in the leg. So like for your daughter, coming off of an injury, maybe was it a right or a left ACL?
She tore her left.
So she tore her left, right? So maybe if we would have had GPS data on her leading up to her injury, we'd be able to see like, hey, she was actually prioritizing that left leg like a lot more, which is why she most likely may have led to an injury in that left leg, right? So now we can see, you know, and obviously we can note that she's prioritizing a certain leg, and then we have to do stuff outside of our practice in the gym to, you know, fix that imbalance. We're taking a look at different impacts, like for football, we can see how many times an athlete, you know, gets hit, which also takes a big toll on their body, right? We're able to see, like I said, different intensities. So an athlete may cover 10,000 meters, but maybe they only cover 5,000 at a certain intensity, and then, you know, other 5,000 at different intensities. But then we're also able to track progression over time. So if we have an athlete on GPS when they're 12, they're running 14 miles an hour, maybe within a year, they're 13 and now they're running 16 miles an hour, right? So obviously they're getting faster. We actually have some data that can tell you how an athlete is progressing over time. If your athlete is still running the same, you know, speed at 13, that now he's 16 and he's still running the same, you know, maybe we have to take a different approach. And like you were saying, into what our athletes are doing, you know, and a lot of times these parents, either they just simply don't know because they've never played sports before, which is not really their fault. So they don't, you know, they're just trying to do what's best for the athlete with for their kid, which is just put them in sports, which is good. But, you know, we started to see, like you said, these 8-9-year-olds that like are just, they're going to soccer practice and maybe soccer training and they're doing everything on the ball 6 days a week, which is good. They're still working, but then they can't jump. They can't stand on one leg without being unbalanced. They can't hold a plank for 10 seconds. There's different parts of training that make up an athlete, and you may, and I see it all the time. You can have the absolute best athlete in the world. And this is kind of getting off of GPS too into the sort of training that I've gotten myself into doing with other athletes. But you may have the best athlete in the world, on soccer, baseball, whatever sport, they may be the best at that sport. But then now, once we take that ball away from you and I tell you, hey, can you accelerate for me? And I just want to see what you look like. 9 out of 10 athletes do not have the general understanding, unless they ran track, on how you need to accelerate, how you need to attack the foot and punch back, how you need to transition, how you need to keep your front side mechanics through max velocity, how you need to keep your hips tucked under you, your core embraced, and your head and your torso quiet. So I've started to do I've just diving deeper into movement off the ball. Wanting to if I tell an athlete, if I just throw a ball and I tell an athlete to go, he's going to get to the ball. But now if I take the ball away from you and I actually have to make you think about how to project your body forward, how to attack your leg back, how to switch the leg. We call it 3 things Jonas said. He said project, switch, and react, right? During running, you project your body forward, you switch the limbs, and then you react because you have to continuously keep doing that, right? Whether it's linear, lateral, backwards, in whichever way. So we started to assess the athlete from a stationary position, seeing that most athletes really don't know how to accelerate. They don't, just because they've never been taught it. And in turn, ingraining these different movement patterns in their brain, like going back to just getting them out of their comfort zone and getting them to do stuff that they're not used to doing. And seeing that, the adaptations that we're getting from the training that we're doing is just night and day with the athlete. We may have, athletes that like we do test max speeds and stuff. But it's more so about how you got to that max speed. You may have 2 athletes that run, 17 miles an hour, but one athlete may hit 17 miles an hour within 15 yards, and the other athlete may take her 30 yards to get there, right? So depending on the sport, if you're running track and you're running a 100-meter, sprint, I wouldn't want you to hit your max speed within 20 meters and then drop off the rest of the sprint. I'd rather you build up, get to there about 50, 60, and then maintain the rest of the way. For soccer, where it's a lot more acceleration, short accelerations at that, and a lot of changes of direction. As we get older, we're going to, of course, prioritize that as we get closer into season. But just because it's a lot more accelerations and a lot more sprints doesn't mean that long distance 60, 70-yard sprint isn't going to matter. Or when it does happen, are we ready for it, right? All it takes is one athlete, one kid to land in front of their center of mass for their hamstring to blow out because they're putting all that 100 and whatever pounds on that hamstring to try to pull them forward, right? So we teach max velocity mechanics, getting an athlete to understand how to land and whip the leg under the hip when they're running, to then help in return, just going back to keeping them healthy. So prioritizing movement and prioritizing, the athlete and trying to teach them these new things that are going to get different adaptations just because we're simply putting them through different exercises that they've never been exposed to before. And once it clicks, once it clicks for them, then it's like, okay, it makes sense, right? And then now it's like, I may see a group of kids once a week, so I need to make sure that I tell them, like, hey, just because I see you once a week and I want athletes to understand concepts and eventually learn to apply them, right? We focus on concepts, we focus on linear, stationary movements in the first month, and then after it's like, okay, well, now can I get you, now that you understand my verbiage, you understand what we're trying to focus on, can we then transition out of that and get you to understand, how this now translate into your sport, into your position. So yeah, kind of veered off from GPS into the training side of stuff. But
That's okay. I'm gonna circle it back for us and hit some other talking points. So I
yeah,
think the GPS is great because like we're living in this data-driven world right now, and I think it is great for everybody, the athlete, the parent, the coach, to actually see the metrics. Like you said, it can help really dial it in. Okay, where are we losing the athlete? You know, where do they really need to start focusing their training on? Risk mitigation, right? That's kind of where I'm seeing things. How can I get this athlete more balanced so that the risk for injury because of some weakness in the chain is occurring and hasn't been properly identified until it's too late, until we actually like tore and broke something. One of my pet peeves is when athletes come in with this like either a pre-diagnosis or they Googled something or somebody told them something. One of the biggest things I hear is that my glutes are weak or I'm quad dominant. So like you're already laughing. I can hear that because I hate to break it to you. Everything that we do, we are all anterior chain dominant. Like, look, you and I are both sitting down. We're sitting on our posterior chains. We're flex forward. We're on the computer. We're on our phones. We're driving. Most sports are in front of us. So that is not rocket science. Yes, we are anterior chain dominant because everything we do is in front of us. The only athlete that I've ever really seen that had a very positive, strong posterior chain were my Olympic backstrokers because that is what they did. They were behind themselves. So I want people to get away from this whole like quad dominant, anterior chain dominant. Such is life. So I do see the value in strengthening that posterior chain, but it's not as easy as just doing like back extensions and hamstring curls, you know? So, you know, as you were saying, really integrating that change of direction, but using the data to show us like where the athlete needs to improve, what are they currently doing. I think we all need to have these checkpoints to make sure that we're not just wasting our time going through the motions. And I think coaches are, I mean, we're all kind of lost for time. We're all trying to do the best that we can. Some coaches just don't have the knowledge on what they need to be looking at. And going back to your soccer analogies, you know, your defensive line versus your forwards maybe don't need to be training the exact same way. And every game, it's going to look a little different depending on, you know, what they're doing and what does their energy look like. One of the new pieces of technology that I was introduced in the last little while was the Ultra treadmill, and how valuable that was when my daughter got cleared to start running again. It's not like, okay, let's just put on running shoes and run to the park. Like there's a progression in how we run, and her PT put her on the Ultra and I think took off 40%. So she was only really running at 60% gravity. She has that little, you know, spacesuit on that's holding her up. And you could see that her left foot was only striking at 40% and her right foot was at 60. And it looked beautiful and it looked perfect. And to the naked eye, you would never be able to see that she wasn't weight bearing as hard on her left, even though she didn't have pain. She had full range of motion and most of her strength had returned. There's something neurological still happening that her brain's like, we can't put weight on there. There's a torn ACL in through there. So I think the GPS and what you were talking about is raw objective data that anybody can look at to see, okay, are we getting better? Are we getting faster? What's the energy expenditure like? And I think it's great for an athlete to look back and see, even if it's, you know, during a game, where they can say, man, I felt so tired during that game. And you could see maybe it was a really, really flat game for them. And then something else I wanted to talk about was, what are you doing for recovery? So they can even look back and be like, oh, I didn't sleep that great, you know, 2 nights before. I was eating not so great. So those are all, I mean, we can train and we can treat athletes all we want, but what are they doing that other 22 hours that they're not with us during the day? Let's talk about some recovery stuff. Are you like a supplement guy? Is there certain things that you recommend athletes take? Are you
No, for me it you know, I've obviously, as athletes progress and they get older, it's a little bit different. But it's like college athletes and stuff, and I'm all. I mean, if an athlete is mentally confident and they like their protein shakes and their, I'm not going to be the person that's going to be like, don't do that. For me, when it comes to recovery, it's really sleep, like you said it. I mean, it's your sleep, it's your nutrition, it's what you're fueling your body with, and it's just the way that you're training, the following day, right? Can we get into some more hip mobility, ankle mobility, spending more time on that sort of stuff, on those active recovery days, whatever they may do during that day, to make sure that that we're recovering and that we're feeling 100% every day, that every time we step on that field. So I'm not much of a supplement guy. I mean, I like the massages. I think that's super, like, let's get the stress out of those muscles and alleviate some stress there. But I don't know, and I'm not well informed enough to talk so much about supplements. But I just tell my athletes, make sure if you sleep 4 or 5 hours a night, you're probably not going to be feeling that great the next day. Get your sleep in, eat the right foods, and train your body correctly. Even after the game, right? A lot of times we just see after a game an athlete may just hamstring scoops, maybe a quad stretch here, and then go home. Where it also takes time to, it may take 30 minutes after your game that you're going to have to be there, but it's part of being an athlete, and it's part of staying healthy, and it's part of feeling good. If we just go straight from a whole bunch of stress during the game to just barely any type of, and then it's just not going to be good for us. So sleep, eat, and then when it comes to the training side of things, is let's spend a little bit more time unlocking the hips and the ankles and the feet, and spending, being okay with, as a coach, taking that extra 15-20 minutes to prep and warm up, so that we're recovering and feel great.
I think, again, you always give me so many talking points to talk about, but one of the things you talked about, like, you had air quotes for active recovery days or whatever, and so many athletes are all about like the schedule and when do I get a day off? And I'm like, day off? Like, do you ever not eat? Do you take a day off of eating? And they're just like, what are you talking about? Like, I go, every day you should be thinking, what am I going to do today that's going to set me up for success tomorrow? Like, that is the mentality. So I get it. There's certain days you need to rest more, and maybe it's sleeping, taking a nap, like watching a movie. There's nothing wrong with that, but you can still do your little toe spreader exercises. You can still, jump in a warm bath and then do some mobility after. You can do some guided meditation. Like, not every day do you need to be like hammering the weights or like going for mile-long runs. So one of the things I say is, no, there's never a day off. I mean, you're an athlete. Every day is setting you up for the next day.
Exactly.
When we moved to California from Canada, I picked up long distance running, and I was a sprinter. And in high school, my mom was a world-class sprinter. I'm a sprinter through and through, but I'm like, we are in California. I want to be outside. So I'm just going to run for a long period of time. Wow. And I hated it because my brain just wanted me to get from here to the stop sign as fast as possible and not keep going. But one of the mantras I kept saying is, this mile sucks, but I'm going to be better the next mile for this mile. And so I think we have to kind of give that mentality to our athletes, that every day is setting us up for tomorrow. So that's the sleep. That's the well-balanced diet. That's not eating like fries from the cafeteria. So I've been all about trying to teach the teenagers to make their own breakfast and pack their own lunches, because you have to be invested in it. I'll get them to research recipes and what ingredients need to go in the recipes, have them be as integrated as part into their nutrition. Keep a food journal, keep a sleep journal. Again, these are all like objective metrics that we need to help put all the little pieces together so our athletes are set up.
I think it's just, it also goes back to, obviously the parents have such a big role in eating and
for sure
the habits that their kids pick up on watching with phones and all that stuff, but I think it's super easy for kids nowadays, and like I was lucky enough to go out with the GPS system, McLeod, out to the Dominican Republic. And I was out there for a few weeks. I was able to talk to basically every Major League Baseball team has an affiliate team in the Dominican Republic. So I was able to meet with a good majority of them, talk to them about GPS and how they could start to try to integrate it within their teams out there. But back to like just, I was able to stay a few days with these young kids that literally have nothing. They their only way out is to potentially hopefully sign a deal with the Major League Baseball team. The way that it kind of works out there, sadly, is like, say I ran my facility and I liked your daughter for baseball or softball or whatever, right? I would say, here's $10,000. I'm going to take your daughter away from you. She's going to stay with me. I'm going to feed her. I'm going to, do everything. And then when she signs the deal with the Major League team, I'm going to take 30% of the deal, whatever it may be, right? So for going back to why I kind of brought it up was that like these kids train Monday through Sunday 24/7 because they only have one goal in life, and that's to make it in their sport, right? They don't have they're not worried about girlfriends, they're not worried about high school drama, they're not worried about their home life is more baseball and more coaching. And if I'm not on the field getting my work in, excuse me, I'm at home, maybe doing some more technical stuff, or I'm watching some stuff. There's like so many, man, it's just so surprising to me how many kids play sports and they don't watch that sport. Like you say you're a soccer player, but you don't watch soccer, or you say you're a baseball player, but you don't watch baseball. That's just because I remember my outlook on was like I went to the baseball field. I grew up a Giants fan, and I went to just go see how they warmed up. I went to go see their what they were wearing. I went to go see how they carried themselves on the field. I went to go see how they wore their glasses. Like I had a different approach on sports and what I looked at. Like even now too. Like now, like when I go see some certain games, like I'll go to a game and I'll be like, okay, I'm just gonna analyze these defensive players and what their main 7 movements are in this game, right? So it's like for kids nowadays, it's it's going back to like, I think kids have an idea of like maybe what they want as far as when it comes to like being an athlete. But not many people actually have that understanding of what it takes to get to where they need to get to, or it starts from the mental side of things at the end of the day. Like if you're not mentally invested, if you don't absolutely love what you're doing, then you're just simply, you're not going to get as far as you think you want to get to. I ask kids even now, sophomores, juniors in high school, what's your goal with like soccer, and like most kids don't know. They're just like, oh, like, which is fine. If you don't know, then just know that that's where things are going to take you to a place where you don't know.
Right.
If you have a set goal and you have a set, mindset on why you're doing what you're doing and why you're spending 30 minutes a day on recovery and mobility and all this tedious stuff that nobody wants to do, then, but it does. I think, like I said, at that, when you're in the Dominican Republic, you don't have a choice. It's one way out. But nowadays, it's like nothing wrong with that. It's like you can, it's just when you have so many different options and you don't, necessarily have to make a decision on one. You're just 30% this, 30% that, 30% that, right? And then you still want to have a home life. You still want to have a boyfriend, your girlfriend. You still want to, and so it's like our focus isn't on one thing. It's easy to go pick up Chick-fil-A as a parent, or it's easy to, but it's like at the end of the day, because I come from where my mom, she juiced for me every single morning before I went to school. I hated it, but I drank it. Our meals throughout the week were all at home. She cooked every single meal. So now I've fallen into that same, just because that's how I was raised, where during the week, I make sure that, gym is a priority. Now it's a little bit different. It's because now I'm just going to the gym just because it's just a lifestyle. But eating at home and doing all the right things that, like, once I get into, my girlfriend has a daughter, so it's the same thing. She's 3 years old, and she does her juices every day. She doesn't drink any soda. She doesn't watch TV during the week. She doesn't have an iPad. All these small little things that really play such a big difference in the way that these kids are being just formed. Essentially, at the end of the day, they say ages 0 to 7 are your most, prone years, susceptible years to just your forming yourself and who you are, so mentally, and physically. So, same thing with Jonas Dodu. I keep kind of circling back to him because he is such a big mentor. Him, Jonas Dodu, Alan Murdoch. But it's like, I learn a lot from them with, like, gymnastics is big. Your kids just, like, go get them to jump around, have fun. They'll probably love to do it, and we're gonna get these adaptations. We're gonna get them to be springy without them even knowing, right? Genes plays a big part in it, but let's get these kids doing so many different things at a young age, to where they have different options and where they explore and learn to do. It's all about problem solving, even with athletes too. It's like when an athlete is good at something and they do it every day and they're good at it and they have no problem doing it, they're not going to ever learn, right? But it's like when I'm actually, having to get you to think about stuff, now you're like, dang, like I thought I was this whole guy, and now I can't even lift my leg from my hip, and or whatever it may be, right? But
we talked about two main things here that I want to talk about really fast. Role models and confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence is a funny thing. Our athletes have to have confidence. They have to have a certain amount of swagger, but they also have to have humility. And, that part in their brain that's like, I'm really good and I have the confidence to do this, but I want to get better. So that motivation to always continually try to improve. And I think a big part of that is I always talk to the teenagers that I work with is like, who or what is your why? And they're like, what? I'm like, what is your why? Why are you doing this? And if it's, to make your dad happy, well, I think you should probably switch from competitive to rec, because you're really just, you're not going to be happy, and you're never going to get better if you're not doing it for you. And having a role model that you can, dare I say, become obsessed with. You talked about going and watching, the sport that you love and watching the guys. And yeah, I was like that. I mean, I'll date myself here, who my two role models were. And it was Jackie Joyner Kersey and FloJo, and I was a skinny little white girl from Canada. And I was trying to like act like these women because they owned the track, and I wanted to do my hair like them. I wanted to get the fake nails. I wanted to wear all the chain. I almost knocked my tooth out running in a track meet because I had the stupid chain on it, because I was trying to look like what these girls look like in the Olympics. And I think that's really, really, really important for whether it's a girl or for a boy, anybody, to have somebody that they can really look up to and emulate, whether it's with the sport or personality wise, and to own that style, to own that swagger, if you will, because that's what's going to, make them better. And if you listen to any of my podcasts with my other co-hosts, when we talk about FSM, I talk about this one documentary, and I swear I don't get any like royalties from it, but it's In Search of Greatness. I don't know if you've seen it. It talks. It's got Pele, you've got the Williams sisters, you've got Jerry Rice on there, and Wayne Gretzky. And this documentary is all about what made these pivotal people who they were. And, a lot of the documentary is kind of based on the fact that our kids are overscheduled, and we're putting them into the same sport 12 months out of the year. But, Pele was talking about, he's arguably the greatest soccer player of all time, trained in a dirt alley, because he just loved it and he just wanted to play. And the component of playing and making it fun, I think, is lost. And, to circle way back to the beginning of our talk, you talked about these warm-ups of getting kids to just play, do tag, get your brain involved, make it competitive, make it fun. And, I think for anything, my job as a performance therapist and kind of what I do is I want people moving for life, so great that the kid has, college scholarship, on the radar, but how are we going to get somebody to love the sport forever? I think
Yeah.
is, what we need. And if you put that kind of bigger spectrum in there, how am I going to get you moving for life and enjoying moving, whether it's running or jumping or, hopefully all of that. When they're invested in it and they enjoy it, I think you're going to get way more results, and you're not going to see the kids going through the motions because it's not for dad, it's not for coach, it's for them. They enjoy it. And if you're not
Definitely.
enjoying it, I think it's time to find a different sport.
Most definitely. And that's, part of the stuff like from coaching and the reason I think I'm the coach that I am is because I've chosen to prioritize the athlete in itself.
Right.
Like I think
Totally.
the biggest thing that makes me happy is when I hear a parent come back to me and say, hey, and it's been several times where like, hey, like he came and started working out with you and now he's, yeah, of course he lost some weight, but he's walking around the house doing push-ups with his chest tall and it's like, so that's what brings me happiness is being able to have impact on these kids, because I knew how it was to be coached by your parents and to absolutely hate to listen to them, and I don't want to hear anything from you. I just want to do what I do, and then to have that coach, that mentor, that friend, and I'm lucky enough that I'm only 26. I'm at an age where I'm still not seen as like a whatever, a 50-year-old 60-year-old coach, right? That maybe like trying to being 60 talking to a 14-year-old is going to be way different than being 26 my age.
Totally. Yeah.
And so like I've I have those conversations with kids because like I'm not gonna say I'm the easiest, like nicest coach. I definitely don't ever take pride on yelling or anything like that, because I know that's not just the best way to get around to people. Every athlete is different. But I also need you to, like, I can't take it more serious than you do. Right. So I find just the crazy amount of joy and just helping these athletes mentally develop, getting them to start to think differently, um, and have an impact not only on their athletic development but also on their mental development, because it just both plays such a big sport. And I have like all I just need kids and athletes to just understand that it takes that sort of obsession. Like you said, you do need to be obsessed. It needs to be something that you live, eat, breathe, and want to do it, not because mommy or daddy, but because you actually enjoy it and love it, and you want it to be something. So
Yes. Well, and I
just
think that trickles into who you are as a coach. It's your passion for what you do is evident in how you're communicating to these athletes. I've seen you demonstrate. I'm going to go back to Peter Twist for a second. I'm taking one of his new fascial training courses, and we're learning more about the human body than ever before, especially fascia. And I'm learning, I'm watching these exercises, and he's like, don't you dare demonstrate something to an athlete that you can't execute perfectly yourself. And I'm just like, oh man. So I am like sweating, trying to like demonstrate this one extra, like to really try to get it 100% before I can show an athlete or can show one of my
yeah,
patients.
huge,
And
yeah,
you're the same though when you demonstrate your running. I mean, you could tell you're an athlete that loves to move and loves to move correctly. And I think that's such an important part. Like you said, it's that that connection you can make with the athletes. Yes, you're younger,
yeah.
so it's more applicable than somebody older, but it's also somebody who
Even
can
then,
actually do it. And I think
yeah.
that's how are you going to tell an athlete what to do if you can't execute it yourself? So
And yeah, I'll get out there and run with my guys all the time. Oh, yeah, you want to race? I'll gas you real quick. But no, it
that's
was just,
awesome.
yeah, it was like, you know, I grew up in that same sort of environment where I worked, but everything I worked was on the ball. I didn't do strength much. I didn't do any type of speed training.
Right.
And it showed. And who knows? where I would be if I would have chosen to prioritize those things in life.
Well, I
But
think
it is,
you are where you are right now, and I'm glad you are doing this. So to wrap things up, if people want to find out more about you, best email would be what? If they need to
yeah.
email you.
You can email me at obmoreno@mccloyd.com. So OBMORENO at McCloyd, MCCLOYD.com. Instagram, Oscar B. Moreno. Twitter, Oscar B. Moreno. And then if you guys are interested in GPS, search up McCloyd Sport.
Perfect.
You know, we work with all athletes, all teams, all clubs, all
Everybody.
PTs as
Yeah.
well. Everybody, anybody can benefit from it. So I just
Yes.
really thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I mean, I've always wanted to get into having my own personal podcast just because I love talking. I love meeting new coaches. I love meeting new people. And I find so much joy in doing this kind of thing.
Well, I'm going to have you back again because you're just like, this is not enough time. I think we've just like scratched the surface of all the things. So we'll have you back.
Definitely.
But thank you so much for coming on today. And we're going to put all the information, how to reach Oscar and everything that he does with the show notes. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have
all right,
a good
Oscar.
rest of your day.
You too.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.